It was a typical hot and humid late July day in Charleston, South Carolina, as I enjoyed a nice lunch with my friend Lisa. I've known Lisa for over 20 years, ever since we were in our freshman year of college together. We were only casual work colleagues until about 10 years ago when we enrolled in the same program to earn our master's degrees in educational administration. It was during that time that we became really close, helping each other through the program, and now I consider her my best friend, and I think she considers me hers. We were talking about our summer and vacations when suddenly she said, "You'll never guess who I ran into at the supermarket last week?" Gosh, Lisa, you know how much I hate playing these guessing games. I have absolutely no idea who you ran into at the supermarket, so why don't you just tell me because I know you're about to die. Who did you run into last week? Well, I was rounding the corner of the aisle, distracted by my grocery list, when my cart collided with another cart. I looked up and started to apologize when I realized that standing in front of me was none other than, "Be prepared. Your ex, Kevin." I had to ask again to make sure, but it was definitely him. And I gotta say, girl, he looked pretty good. Didn't look like he'd aged much in the last, what is it, 15 years? When you got married, I'd only met him a few times at work, Christmas parties and end-of-year parties, and you were long since divorced when we were in grad school. But I knew it was him as soon as I saw those brown eyes and his killer smile. You probably didn't know it then, but we all hated you. At least us single girls did. We were always so jealous of you when you went to a party with him. Damn, Allison, I can't believe you let him get away with it. Well, it clearly wasn't a good time, and for your information, it's been 18 years since our divorce. My God, just saying that makes me feel old. Anyway, I can't believe he's back after all these years. Maybe he's just visiting his parents. I think they still live here. No, I think he came back to town a few weeks ago. He said something about being the new managing partner at his law firm's office here in Charleston. Right now, he's in the process of remodeling his parents' house on James Island. He said it's gotten too big for them, so they're moving into one of those retirement homes in Mount Pleasant, and Kevin is moving into their house by the river. That's interesting. I haven't heard a word from him since he left town for Chicago after our divorce. Even all of our friends gradually lost touch with him, but the last time I heard from him was about 12 or 13 years ago when someone showed me a picture of him and his new wife. I think she was a doctor of some sort. I don't remember much about her except that I remember how beautiful she was and how very angry I was at how happy they looked. Eventually, I turned the conversation to something more pleasant and tried to put Kevin out of my mind. We finished lunch, and I went back to school to go over the final student and teacher assignments for the upcoming school year before classes start again next month. As principal of Riverview Elementary School, this was one of my least favorite tasks. But unfortunately, it's part of the job, so I can just suck it up and get it over with. This was my first year at Riverview, so it took me a little longer than usual due to the fact that I wasn't as familiar with the teachers and students as I was at my previous school. At least it took my mind off of thinking about Kevin. I finished work around 5 o'clock and headed home, grabbing some chicken choy mein from my favorite Chinese restaurant on the way. I was still living in the little house Kevin and I had bought when we first got married. He was so eager to get out of town during the divorce. The last thing he wanted was to be tied to a house where we had very few possessions. So he gladly gave me the house in exchange for me not contesting the divorce. Once inside, I tossed my keys on the counter, grabbed a bottle of wine from the refrigerator, and found the largest glass in the house. I already knew this was going to be a bottle of wine night, not a glass of wine night. After pouring myself a glass, I settled down in front of the TV after eating dinner and tried to distract myself with some mindless program on the Travel Channel. But my thoughts kept returning to Kevin and that period in our lives when everything had gone from perfect to absolutely ruined in a few short months. I couldn't help but feel responsible for everything that happened then. I was young and immature in many ways, as we both were. But that doesn't excuse my actions. We both made some very wrong choices, and unfortunately, it proved to be too hard for us. Now, after all these years, he was back in town, and it was only a matter of time before I ran into him somewhere. I imagined how awkward it would be when I ran into his new wife. I felt awkward when I looked at their picture from years ago, saw how beautiful she was, and heard she was a doctor. I have a doctorate as well, but it somehow doesn't sound like an MD to me. What would I say if I ran into them? As the TV continued to run, my thoughts went back to when we first met. I had met Kevin Middleton during freshman orientation when we both entered college. He was an outgoing, tall, good-looking baseball player, and I was a pretty good-looking girl who was very shy and, if I may say so, a bit of a tomboy. But somehow, we connected that weekend and became very close friends. It stayed that way until junior high, when we realized we were starting to have feelings for each other. But even then, it took a few months before we went on a real date, and then 4 more dates before we became close. We were such good friends that I think we were both a little hesitant about whether or not to end the relationship until we were convinced that what we had was more than just friendship. When we started dating, Kevin was the perfect gentleman and took things very slowly, never pushing me faster than I was ready. At first, I was even a little offended that he wasn't trying anything with me. After all, I'd been his friend since we moved to campus, and I'd seen him take home girls from bars more than once after knowing them for only a few hours. Kevin was the typical big man on campus. He was athletic, handsome, and very intelligent. Therefore, finding girls willing to have sex with him was not difficult at all. I, on the other hand, was very shy and inexperienced. It was quite noisy on the dance floor when Kevin approached me. He leaned down to my ear and asked, "How about you take this to my apartment?" I didn't say a word, just took his hand and pulled him towards the door. When we got to his apartment, he quickly unlocked the door and led me inside, then closed the door and locked it behind us. That was the end of it. Over the next week, life went on as I continued to prepare for the start of the new school year. I had pretty much put Kevin out of my mind and convinced myself that the chances of meeting him were slim to none, when suddenly it happened. I walked out of my office to get something from the printer, and as I crossed the threshold, I saw him sitting in front of the attendant secretary's desk. He was much older than the last time I'd seen him, but there was no doubt that it was indeed Kevin. But why the hell was he at my school? I'd never heard that he and his wife had kids, but apparently they did. Why else would he be in elementary school? My first thought was to run to my office, shut the door, and sit there until he left. But if he has kids here, he'll eventually find out I'm the principal of the school, so I might as well deal with it right now. Damn, I suddenly wished I had taken the time to put on a nicer dress and makeup in the morning, but now it was too late. I managed to walk across the office to the door to the attendant's office without him noticing me. "Hey, Kevin. Good to see you again." He looked around to see who was there, and I continued, "I can't believe it's really you. Who would believe that after all these years without a word from you, I would walk out of my office and see you sitting there in the flesh? Tell me how you're doing." "Oh my God, Allison, is that really you? I had no idea you worked here. Hell, I didn't even know if you still lived in the city." He lifted from his chair for a moment, as if unsure of what to do, but then he did open his arms and leaned over to hug me. "It's been a while, hasn't it? You still look beautiful, by the way." "Thank you. That's very nice of you. Tell me, what do you do?" "Well, of course, I still live here. In fact, not only am I still here in Charleston, but I still live in our old house. After my divorce, I went back to school, finished my master's and doctorate in education, and have been working in principal for the last 5 years. But I've only been working here for about a month. This will be my first year as principal of Riverview School. So now you know my story, but what in God's name are you doing here? Don't tell me you have kids." "Well, as a matter of fact, I do. I actually have 3 of them, and I'm doing what most parents do when they move to another town, enrolling them in school. Right now they're with my mom, but I'm sure you'll get to know them when classes start. I have a daughter who will be in 5th grade and 2 sons, one in 3rd grade and one in kindergarten." At this point, I was mentally searching for a way to escape. My inability to have children was the beginning of our problems, and I felt myself starting to lose my temper. So I quickly tried to think of a way to wrap things up and escape to my office before I did something embarrassing. "Wow, I'm so happy for you. I'm looking forward to meeting them. I'm sure if they're anything like you, they'll be great students. Well, I've kept you late enough, and I'm sure you need to get back to work, so I'll go ahead and let you finish up here. But I hope to see you and your wife at our open house in a few weeks. I look forward to seeing her and the kids." I wouldn't miss it. I know the kids are excited about the new school and they can't wait to meet the new teachers, but by the way, the kids and I are on our own. My wife died last year. "Oh my God, Kevin. I had no idea. I'm so sorry to hear that. I guess that's what I got for my assumptions." I felt my face redden with embarrassment. "I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you and the kids since her death. I just can't imagine what it's like to go through something like that and how hard it is for you. If there is anything I can do to help your children adjust to a new town and a new school, please let me know." "Thank you, Allison. That's very kind of you. In fact, that's the main reason I moved here. We all needed a change of scenery, and I thought it would be good for the kids to be around family more. Plus, mom and dad are thrilled to be able to spoil them every day. Well, I've taken up enough of your time, so I'll let you get back to work, but it was really good to see you again. It's good to see you too. I guess I'll see you again. That night was a repeat of the night after Lisa told me Kevin was back in town. I just couldn't get him out of my thoughts and dreams. Over the next few nights, I repeatedly woke up in a sweat. All the dreams started the same way, with happy memories of Kevin and I being together, and ended with the horrors of the day he caught me with Patrick Westbrook. I'd managed to put those bad memories behind me a long time ago, until Kevin came out of nowhere and turned my world upside down. I thought I had forgiven myself and moved on with my life, but things turned out to be a lot easier when Kevin completely disappeared from view. My affair only lasted a couple months, but it completely ruined my life and the future I had planned. The following week, Lisa and I met again for lunch, as we always did on Mondays during the summer. We both worked as educators, so summer was the only time we could really meet for lunch. After school resumed, we got together about once a month for an evening out, but unlike me, Lisa had a husband and family to take care of. So those evenings usually consisted of an early dinner and a trip to the movies because she usually had to get home pretty early. We talked about school and her kids until I finally realized she couldn't resist anymore. So are you going to tell me about seeing Kevin again after all these years? I can't believe he has kids and that out of all the schools in the district this year, they're going to be in your school. Yeah, it's a small world, isn't it? I honestly don't know how to feel about all of this. It was really great to see him again, and you were right, he looks as good as ever. I just don't know what it's like to see him regularly at school. He was nice enough when I saw him, but I can't believe it wouldn't be very awkward after everything that happened between us. He was so aloof and cold when we got divorced. It seemed like all the crap of our last year together just broke him. But maybe time has at least healed the wounds a little bit. He definitely looks like the old Kevin from when I saw him in high school. I think you're overthinking this. He's probably long since forgotten about everything that happened between you two. I bet if you both were honest with yourselves and really remembered everything that happened when you were married, you'd find that the good memories far outweigh the bad. By the way, I hope you don't mind me asking, but my curiosity is killing me. What exactly happened between you and Kevin? I didn't know you very well at the time, but I heard rumors that you were cheating on him with that math teacher who left shortly after you and Kevin broke up. Then when I got to know you better, I just couldn't believe you could do something like that, and I didn't want to pry, so I just dismissed those rumors. No, I didn't mind. You heard it all right. I was pregnant the year before, and I miscarried twice. Then I went through all kinds of tests, and it turned out I could never have children. So Kevin and I decided it would be best for me to have my tubes tied. After that, it was like a wedge was driven between us. We both wanted kids so badly. I think I started to drift away from Kevin, and he got caught up in his work. In my mind, the wedge in our marriage was his fault, and I was very angry that he left me when I needed him most. He worked 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. I tried to move on with my life, but there was always a hole I couldn't fill. Patrick showed up and found a sympathetic ear. We had lunch every day in his classroom, and he would listen to me complain about all my problems, and I would listen to him complain about his wife, who he said made him feel inferior because she looked down on him. After all, he was only a teacher. Did it ever occur to you that you were being played with and that all he wanted to do was get in your pants? I realize now that he was just using me, but at the time I was so hungry for attention that I was willing to do anything to get it. He took advantage of my state of mind and pretended to be interested in all my problems. He made himself look like an abandoned spouse, just like me, to make me feel connected to him, and then made me feel an intimacy with him that I didn't feel with Kevin at the time. I should have seen it coming, but I was too immersed in self-pity to realize what he was doing. Never. He convinced me to start going to the local park after school every Wednesday so we could just walk and talk alone, and I gave in to the ruse. Wow, Allison, I never knew those rumors were true. I just always thought it was just a coincidence that he left school just before your divorce. You know how we teachers like to use our imaginations. Since you've piqued my curiosity, could you tell me exactly how Kevin managed to catch you? Lisa asked. Well, Kevin and I had barely spoken to each other by that point, so I had no idea that he and his friend Logan regularly stopped after work to run in this very park. The universe just lined up perfectly so that we ended up there at the same time that day. Kevin recognized my car, as well as a car he didn't know, parked in one of the far parking lots as he ran past on one of the trails, and came over to check it out. As with the previous times we'd met in the park, Patrick and I sat in the back seat. Like I said, I was so pleased that a man wanted me again that I didn't even think to make him stop and let him continue. Before I knew it, we were already there. And suddenly, the back door of the car opened and I felt Patrick being pulled out of the car. When I opened my eyes, I saw Kevin dragging him by the hair across the parking lot, shouting profanities at both of us. Kevin slammed the door shut, climbed into the front seat, started the car and drove off, leaving Patrick lying on the ground, naked to the waist. He drove to the parking lot where his car was parked at the other end of the park, collected Patrick's clothes, wallet, and keys, threw them in the car and drove off. To make matters worse, he took my car keys as well, leaving me in the park. Thank God he left my cell phone, otherwise I don't know what I would have done. When I was finally able to get home, he had already packed up and left. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer his cell phone or his work phone. It took almost a week before I finally saw him, and he made it clear he had no intention of putting up. "Oh shit, that's a hell of a story. How come I never heard about it until now?" Lisa asked. "Like it's not obvious. It's not something you want a lot of people to know about." Kevin offered not to sue on the grounds of infidelity if I agreed not to contest the divorce. I didn't have much of a choice. Kevin worked at a large law firm and had all these legal resources, and I was a teacher with very little income. So he gave me the house, which we had very little equity in at the time. We split the bank accounts and went our separate ways. I never understood why he was so generous with the house. After all, his parents had given us the down payment as a wedding gift. But I was in no position to make waves. He barely spoke to me the whole time and left town as soon as the divorce was finalized. All I knew at that point was that he had taken a job at his firm's office in Chicago. The only good thing about the whole thing was that I was able to walk away with dignity. So what happened to Patrick after that evening in the park? After that day, he avoided me like the plague. True, he talked to me long enough to tell me that Kevin had come to see him and his wife to return his pants and wallet. He didn't say anything else except that he didn't want to lose his wife, which meant we couldn't communicate anymore. He left town a few months after that, and later I found out that his wife had found a new job, and they had moved to Savannah. Oh God, I don't know what to say. But unfortunately, as fascinating as this story is, I really have to go. I'll call you later and you can finish the story. If I don't hurry, I'll be late picking up the kids from camp. But I am counting on you to keep me informed about this whole situation. The next school year promises to be very interesting. I'm not sure interesting is the word I'd use. Nightmarish is probably a more appropriate word. That night, sitting on the back porch with a stiff margarita, I replayed the whole sneaky episode with Patrick in my head. How could I have been so stupid? I knew all along it was wrong. A married woman shouldn't trust anyone but her husband, and she certainly shouldn't have fun with anyone but her husband. And suddenly the truth was right in front of me. It was my fault. I blamed Patrick for years of seducing me, taking advantage of me, and convincing me to do things I didn't want to do. But it was a lie. I was the one who opened up to him, telling him about all the problems in my marriage. I was the one who didn't stop him when he kissed me that first time. I was the one who kept meeting him in that park, knowing how it would all end. And more importantly, I didn't just let it go further, I wanted it to. I wanted to feel needed and wanted. I wanted it all, and it wasn't until I lost it all that I saw it for what it was, a cheap substitute for the real thing. Oh my God, how could I have been so stupid? Finally, after a hellish pity party and 3 margaritas, I got tired of remembering my miserable past and dragged my drunken ass to bed. But even then, sleep didn't come. I replayed the events of my affair in my head, and I found it hard to believe that I had actually done those things, but I knew I had. How could I have been so stupid? Eventually, after crying enough, the alcohol took over and I fell asleep. Waking up the next morning, I felt like hell. My head hurt, my stomach was upset, and all I could do was drag myself out of bed and into the shower, but I had too much to do to stay home today. The rest of that week was very busy as the whole school was getting ready for the start of the new year. I even managed to put Kevin in self-pity out of my mind for a few days. But Thursday came and it dawned on me that today was the open house and he would most likely be here with his kids. My stomach had been tied in a knot all day, but I managed to get everything done that needed to be done and run home in time for a shower. I don't know why it mattered to me, but I wanted to look my best for Kevin. He looked so handsome in his suit and tie that day at the office, and I guess I wanted him to know that even after all these years, I still knew how to clean myself up. I picked out my favorite black dress. I probably spent more time than usual on my hair and makeup, but the finished product looked pretty damn good to say the least. Taking one last look at myself in the mirror, I took a deep breath, told myself once again that everything was going to be okay, and hurried out the door to make it on time. That evening, the school was filled with students and parents going from room to room, getting to know their new teachers and filling out all the necessary forms for the new year. For me, the evening was spent socializing and introducing myself as the new principal. It wasn't until almost at the very end that I finally saw him. He was talking to one of the kindergarten teachers, and he was being held by the hand of a cute little blonde-haired boy. In that very moment, I saw Kevin in a way I had never seen him before. I had seen the feisty athlete, the fun-loving student, the loving husband, and the serious lawyer, but I had never seen him as a father. Tears came to my eyes at the thought that our children would be the ones who would have to hold his hand and call him daddy. I quickly ran to the restroom to gather my thoughts, and after a good cry, I wiped my eyes and fixed my makeup and then went back outside, telling myself to stay calm and it would all be over soon. As I came out of the restroom, I immediately saw them walking down the hallway, so I decided that I could get this over with and headed over to the kids to introduce myself. Hey Kevin, did you guys find everything okay? Yeah, I think so. We've met all the teachers and learned where everything is, so I think we're ready for Monday. And these must be your kids. Hello, young ladies. I'm Miss Middleton. And you are? I asked his daughter, extending my hand. She shook my hand like an adult and introduced herself. I'm Hannah, and these are my brothers Will and Michael. Nice to meet you, I said, squatting down to shake their little hands. I'm so glad you'll be here this year. I'm sure we'll have the best time, and I know you'll love Riverview. Just then I heard a thin voice say, Hey, Daddy. Her name is the same as ours. Caught off guard, I didn't know what to say, but Kevin didn't hesitate to respond. That's right, son. She has the same name. I guess you have no excuse for not remembering her name, do you? About this time, Will, his middle son, spoke up. So, Miss Middleton, are you related to us? This time I was more nimble and answered him, No, dear, I'm not related to you. But your father and I have been good friends for a long time. In fact, we went to college together. Sometime I'll tell you some stories about how young he was. Now, if your father doesn't mind, there are muffins and juice in the cafeteria, if you're interested. Instantly, a trio of voices broke out. May I, Dad? May I, Dad? Kevin quickly gave in and they left, bursting through the cafeteria doors. Well, I guess I should get going and you guys go find your kids, I said. Turning to leave, I paused for a second and turned to him again. I know this isn't a surprise to you, but you have 3 beautiful children. I'm very happy for you, Kevin. I only wish I had the opportunity to meet their mother. Thank you, Allison. That's very nice of you, he said as he headed for the cafeteria door. I stared after him and was about to turn to leave when he turned to me again and said, Hold on a second, Allison. Can I ask you something? Sure, what do you want to ask me? I replied, turning to face him again. He looked around nervously for a few seconds before he finally spoke. Okay, let's get started. First off, it was really nice to see you again. I'll admit it's a little awkward, but it's still nice. I've been thinking a lot about us this past week and how things ended. And gosh darn it, Allison. I can't get you out of my head since I saw you here a few weeks ago. If you're uncomfortable, just tell me, and I'll stop. But seeing you brought back old feelings, and I can't escape the feeling that we still have a lot of unfinished emotional business that we need to put behind us. Hell, we've never even seriously talked about any of it, and I take the blame for that. So I'll just lay my cards on the table. Seeing you again made me feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. I know it might seem crazy, but I really want to ask you if you'd like to go on a real date sometime, but before I can do that, I need to tell you something about our divorce, something I don't think you know, something I should have told you years ago, something you have a right to know. Then after that, if you don't mind, I want to ask you out on a date. But I want you to be able to answer with full knowledge of everything that happened back then. If you're not interested at all, just tell me, and I'll drop the whole thing. But I still want to tell you the whole truth. So I guess the question I want to ask you today is, can we meet soon so I can tell you some things I think you deserve to know? Wow, I don't know what to say. Honestly, that's the last thing I thought you'd ever say to me. Ever since that day at the office, I've been thinking about you, about us, all the time. Honestly, I've even dreamt about us. I've replayed all those years 1,000 times in my head. And I have to admit, I'm definitely intrigued to go on a date with you someday. But I'm a little intimidated by the secret you have to tell me. So I guess what I'm saying is that yes, I'd like to meet you so we can talk about this great secret of yours. And after that, we can decide on a date. Good. That sounds like a plan. I don't know what else to say since I wasn't sure how you'd react. So, would you be okay with spending this weekend so we can sit and talk? I think I can arrange that, Mr. Middleton. How about Saturday? That sounds great, Allison. The kids are going camping with my brother's family this weekend, so maybe I can pick you up around 9 o'clock and we can talk over breakfast? 9 o'clock would suit me just fine. I'll look forward to it since you've piqued my curiosity. I'd give you the address, but hopefully you can still find your way to our old house. See you later. Friday. I was doing the last little things in preparation for the start of classes on Monday, but Friday night was a different story. The evening stretched on endlessly as I went over in my head all the possible options of what Kevin wanted to say to me. It could have been any one of a number of possibilities. I'd seen him in town with that redhead from his office shortly after we'd broken up. Maybe he wanted to tell me that he'd started seeing her before our divorce was even finalized. Or maybe he wanted to tell me about his encounter with Patrick and his wife. I never found out all the details of what happened when Kevin got his stuff back. For all I know, maybe he just wanted to tell me that he had already decided to divorce me before he found out about my affair. Finally, after drinking too much wine again, I fell asleep on the couch, and the next moment I glanced at my phone and realized with horror that it was 8:30. Damn it. He'll be here in 30 minutes, and I'm still in the same clothes I wore to work yesterday. I took a quick shower and got dressed, barely finishing my makeup when I heard the doorbell ring. Throwing one last glance in the mirror to make sure everything was in place, I opened the door. "Good morning, sunshine," he said when I opened the door. I haven't decided if this is a good thing or not yet. As you can tell, I'm still not much of a morning person. I guess you remember that and are using it to your advantage by giving away your big secret while I'm still not fully awake, I joked. I grabbed my purse and closed the door behind me as we headed down the sidewalk to his car. Ever since the day he showed up at the school office, I couldn't get the thought out of my head that almost everything in his life since our divorce made me mildly jealous. I ended up divorced, unable to have children, and alone, save for a few close girlfriends and a few romantic relationships that never seemed to last longer than 6 months. Somehow, Kevin had remarried a beautiful woman, had 3 wonderful children, had a successful career, and now, as we walked to my driveway, he confirmed all of those sentiments when I saw him pick me up in a Mercedes SL 550 Roadster convertible. I was already mad at him, and he hadn't even told me his big secret yet. I managed to marry Kevin's poor young lawyer, and his second wife got Kevin's rich and successful lawyer. He must have read my mind because when we got into the car, he paused for a second, handed me the keys, and said, "Why don't you drive?" I think I gave new meaning to the phrase, "drive like you stole it." Kevin didn't say a word. He just leaned back in his chair while I frayed my nerves, testing out his powerful little toy. Once seated in the restaurant, we ordered, and I told him about the last 18 years of Allison Middleton's life. Not that it took long, and he told me about his wife and children. The conversation was light and friendly, but I could sense that he was nervous. Finally, when our food was brought to us, he mustered up the courage to tell me the reason we were sitting here. Putting down his fork, he moved slightly in his seat and began, "I don't know how to tell you all of this, so I'm going to start at the beginning, and you can stop me if it doesn't make sense to you. I think it's best to start right after my second miscarriage. When we found out we couldn't have children, it felt like my whole world came crashing down. All the dreams and plans I had made for our lives would never come true. I think we were both in the same position, but neither of us were mature enough to handle the situation properly, and we kind of went into our shell and withdrew from the world." Pausing to gather his thoughts, he continued, "You were detached and depressed, and no matter what I tried, nothing helped. I felt like you had lost all interest in me. I was angry. I was angry at you because, in my opinion, it was your fault that we would never have children. I realize now that I was wrong, but back then I was just angry at everything. I was angry that you wouldn't talk to me about anything. I felt like I couldn't talk to you because when you were home, all you did was sit on the couch and cry. Please understand, I'm not saying any of these things were true. I'm only saying that those were my feelings at the time. I can certainly understand all of that, I told him. I think we were both in a lot of pain, and we were so young. We'd never had to face something so serious, and we did the best we could given the circumstances. Unfortunately, we made some huge mistakes, and before we knew it, things were out of control. I pulled away from you, but I felt like you pulled away from me as well. I wish we could have talked about this 18 years ago. Agreed. But keep that thought in your head while I tell you the rest because it's only going to get worse from here. Briefly about what you know. I caught you in the car with that guy Patrick. I packed up, I left, and we got divorced. But what you don't know is that while you were cheating with Patrick, I was cheating on you with Casey Graham from my office. I was in so much pain that I just wanted to leave and move on with my life. And when I found out about you and Patrick, I used that to get you to agree to a divorce without fighting me. Oh my God, Kevin, it all makes so much more sense now. This is why you never wanted to go to counseling or even consider reconciliation. I could feel the anger building up inside me as I asked him. So tell me, Kevin, how long did your affair last before you found out about Patrick? Well, it depends on what you consider the beginning. A few weeks after the tubal ligation, we were working on that big case that was taking up so much of my time. Things were very complicated between us at that point, and Casey seemed interested in my problems and willingly listened to me. At first, we just talked, and I was very relieved to have someone to talk to. I know I should have talked to you instead of her, and then nothing would have happened, but I didn't. I kept talking to her, and before I knew it, things were out of control. It all started with a kiss after going out for drinks a few weeks after a long day of examining the evidence. I felt so guilty and knew I should have stopped it, but I didn't. Then, a few weeks after that, we got into it at her apartment. This was about 3 weeks before I caught you and Patrick. I was with her probably 5 or 6 times during that time, and then we were together for about 2 months after we broke up. Okay, Kevin, you really have to give me a minute. I had no idea all of this was going on. I guess I was so wrapped up in self-pity that I didn't notice what you were doing at the time. Now I don't know whether to be happy that I finally found out the truth, or angry that you waited so long to tell me and let me spend 18 years blaming myself. What you did with Casey was almost identical to what was going on between me and Patrick, but apparently you were better at it than I was, because I got caught, and you didn't. My God, how could I have been so stupid? You weren't stupid, Allison. You were walking around in this emotional fog and just trying to survive. Besides, I didn't have much luck catching you in that park. Patrick's wife had contacted me a week or so before and said she suspected he was having an affair with you but couldn't prove it. So I brought in one of the investigators we use at work, and he did me the favor of following you a few times after work and telling me that you went to the park with Patrick after work every Wednesday. The day I caught you, I was there before you even arrived and was watching everything from behind a tree. When I realized you were really going to do this to him, I rushed to my car and broke things off. At this point, my head was spinning, trying to match what I remembered of that time with what I was being told now. So tell me, Kevin, in all these years, has it ever occurred to you that I deserve to know the truth about my life? Because it seems to me that the only reason I'm finding out the truth now is because you want something from me, and you're afraid it will all blow up if I find out later from someone else. To be completely honest, I've had those thoughts over the years, but I always thought it was best for everyone not to reopen those wounds. Hell, in those first few years, I was so out of it that I couldn't think about anyone but myself. All I did during that time was work and go from one woman to another, trying to feel whole again. It wasn't until I met Suzanne that everything fell into place in my mind. She didn't even consider marrying me until we went through some pretty extensive premarital counseling. So it was that counseling that helped me deal with what happened between us, taught me how to be responsible in a relationship and how to deal with things the right way. In fact, it was Suzanne who encouraged me to contact you and tell you about all of this. She tried to convince me that you deserved to know, but I was ashamed of what I'd done and made excuses for not telling you, convincing myself that it wasn't fair to rip the rug out from under your life just to ease my conscience. He paused again, apparently to see if I had anything to say, but I was still trying to make sense of everything, so he continued. So if I haven't made myself perfectly clear, I need you to hear that I am very sorry for my cheating and for participating in the destruction of our marriage. I also regret not coming clean to you years ago. It wasn't fair to you, and I know it's not much, but all I can say at this point is that I'm sorry. I guess I just need time to think things through. I can't think straight, and I'm afraid I'll say or do something that I'll regret later if I don't get everything sorted out before we talk again. If you don't mind, I think I really need to go home. I understand. Look, I realize that after all this, you may never want to talk to me again. And if that's what you want, I'll respect your decision. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when I was married to Suzanne. I don't know how to describe it, but I truly loved you both equally. I realized that you were special, even as early as freshman year, and I was damn lucky to have you as a friend. When we started dating, I already knew you were the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but I wasn't sure if you felt the same way. Said, I wish I could go back in time and do things differently, but I can't. All I can do is try to learn from my mistakes and not repeat them. I just hope you find it in your heart to give me another chance, and if you do, I'll live the rest of my life trying to prove it to you. I think if you spend some time with me, you'll see that I'm a completely different person than I was then, and I bet you've hung up a lot of things too. I had nothing more to say, so he paid the bill and drove me home. We drove in silence until he pulled up in my driveway. We got out of the car and he walked me to the door. So what are we going to do next? Right now, I'm not sure. I guess I need to try to think things through. In the meantime, I guess I'll see you around. I closed the door and watched him walk away, not knowing what our future would be. For the next couple weeks, he and I didn't see each other or talk. Days were taken up with studying, and I spent my evenings trying to make sense of our conversation on Saturday morning. I was overwhelmed with emotions ranging from anger to relief, confusion, and anger again. Finally, after being given time to think through everything I now knew about our past, I came to a decision. It took me a few days to work up the courage, but finally I called his office. Hello, this is Kevin Middleton. How can I help you? Hello, Kevin, it's me. I've been thinking about everything you've said, and I think I've come to a decision regarding what you've asked me to do. After an awkward pause, he said, So are you going to keep me in suspense, or are you going to tell me what you're thinking? I was depressed the whole time after that Saturday and was hoping you'd call me back at some point. Okay, first, you have to realize that I'm still very angry that you didn't tell me the truth sooner. But I can understand why you didn't. Second, I don't know if we can get through this or not, but I think we owe it to you to at least try. If we didn't, I know I would always wonder what if. So, if you're still interested, I'd like to accept your invitation to go out with you. Oh my God, you had me worried for a moment. I can promise you that I'm definitely still interested. So, Miss Middleton, are you available for dinner this Saturday? Yes, Mr. Middleton, I'm sure I'm free on Saturday. Very well. I will pick you up at 6 o'clock. Wear something casual. As we were about to hang up, I said, Wait, Kevin, I have one more thing to say. I need to tell you that I too am truly sorry for my cheating. I've tried to make excuses to blame it on Patrick or you, but I've recently come to the realization that it was entirely my fault. So I'm sorry for cheating on you. I'm sorry I lied to you, and I'm sorry I hurt you. Maybe we can both work on that forgiveness together. I'm sorry I'm running away, but I have to go. I'll see you on Saturday. Bye. I spent the next few days trying to focus on work, but it was no use. I was completely distracted, replaying every possible scenario and conversation in my head, from our date going well and us ending up in the same bed, to us having a huge fight and never speaking to each other again. Well, at least those two extremes are familiar to me, so I think I can handle everything in between. Finally, Saturday night came, and not knowing what he meant, I decided to wear what would be appropriate in many places: a modest sundress and flat sandals. Apparently, he did have a casual lifestyle in mind, as he showed up at my door wearing shorts, a button-down shirt, and flip-flops. The conversation was light and casual as we drove into downtown Charleston, parked at the Battery, and walked down East Bay Street to a small seafood and oyster bar. I hope this place is okay, he said. I've been here a few times with my triathlon club, and it reminded me of this place we used to go to in college. It's beautiful here. Believe it or not, I've lived in Charleston for over 20 years and I've never been here, but it looks great. We had a wonderful dinner and talked for hours, just like we used to in college. We talked about my career, my unstable personal life, and he was open to all my questions about Suzanne. He told me about how they met, about his life in Chicago. We talked about his children and Suzanne's cancer. I was amazed at how candid he was with me about how hard it was for him and the children after her death. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he said, I hate to do this, but I must go home. I promised the babysitter I'd be back by 11 o'clock, and if we don't go now, I won't make it. So he paid the bill and we headed back to my house. Halfway there, I noticed that he had been a little quiet since we left the restaurant. What's on your mind? You haven't said anything since we got in the car. Nothing bad, but I feel like I need to tell you something before we go any further, and I was just trying to think of a way to tell you about it. Well, since you asked, let's get started. I had a great time tonight and I hope you did too. In fact, there's nothing I'd like more than to do it again very soon. But if you're interested in keeping this going, I need to ask you a couple of favors. First, my kids can't know anything about us right now. If things get more serious, of course I'll put them at the table and tell them everything. But this is something they need to hear from me. So I need you to promise me that you won't mention that we're together until I'm ready to talk to them. Next, and this is the hardest part of the conversation, I need you to understand that I'm not ready for a physical relationship with anyone right now. Since I met Suzanne, she is the only woman I have had an intimate relationship with. We have been faithful to each other for 15 years, and it will take me a little more time before I am ready to open up that part of myself to someone else. So please, be patient with me. We drove in silence for a few minutes until I was sure he was done, and only then did I answer him. Okay, so it wasn't that bad, right? Let me see. Where should I start? Let's start by saying that I had a great time tonight and I'd love to go out with you again. In fact, I'm going to hunt you down and really hurt you if you don't ask me out on another date soon, mister. As for your children, I would never tell them about us until you are ready yourself. You're absolutely right to want to protect them after all they've been through with their mother's death. So on that, we are in complete agreement. Now about the no physical relationship thing, you do remember that we had the same agreement when we first started dating, which was 25 years ago, don't you? It worked then, and I'm sure it will work now. In fact, I think it says a lot about your relationship with Suzanne that you still respect your marriage so much even a year after she's gone. And that's even heartwarming. So why don't we just play this part by ear? And I think we'll both understand when the time comes. All he said in response was thank you, and then took my hand and held it in his until we pulled into my driveway. After walking me to the door, he kissed me on the cheek, said goodnight, and promised to call me soon to set up another date, which he did the following Tuesday. We continued to see each other a couple times a week for the next few months. Things were going well from my perspective, but I could tell he was still very cautious. One Friday night when we got back to my house, instead of coming out and walking me to the door, he took my hand and said, "Wait a minute, I want to talk to you about something." My heart almost stopped in my chest when he said that. The first thought that came to my mind was that he was going to tell me that things didn't work out, and we wouldn't be able to see each other again. After what seemed like an eternity had passed, he finally spoke again. "I was wondering if you could come over tomorrow afternoon. I was thinking of grilling hot dogs and hamburgers with the kids and then maybe talk to them about you and me." Before I could answer, I felt tears streaming down my face. There's nothing in this world that would make me happier. But are you sure you're ready? Because in case you haven't noticed yet, I love you, Kevin Middleton. And I will wait for you for as long as it takes for you to be 100% sure. Well, I think you've been patient enough. And I think it's time for the kids, my family, and the world to know how much I love you. Before he could say another word, I leaned over the console of his car, took his head in my hands and kissed him hard, pressing his lips to mine as the tears continued to flow. When I pulled away from him, he said, "Wow, I hope you'll be just as excited about my next question." He paused for a few seconds as if trying to find the right words before he finally spoke again. "I was also wondering if you would be willing to go on a little trip with me next weekend during fall break. My parents have a small cabin in the mountains near Brevard, North Carolina, and they've agreed to watch the kids so we can have some time to ourselves if you're free. If that means what I think it means, then I can pack up and leave with you tonight. But I've waited this long, so I think I can hold out for another week." The next day, I pulled up to Kevin's house around 4 o'clock, just as we had agreed the day before. I remembered the house from back when we were married and his parents lived in it. But he had completely remodeled and modernized the entire house. I stood by the huge windows in the family room, admiring the amazing view of Clark Sound and the beautifully landscaped yard that led to the boat dock. While I waited, Kevin gathered the kids and one by one they ran down the stairs to see why the principal had come to see them on Saturday. When everyone was gathered, Kevin sat them down on the couch and told them that he and I were longtime friends, that we really liked each other, and that he wanted me to be his girlfriend if that was okay with them. The boys were excited about the idea, but I noticed that Hannah was a little concerned. When I asked her what was bothering her, she simply asked if I was going to marry her daddy. I knew she really wanted to know, so I tried to explain to her that I wasn't trying to replace her mom, that I just wanted to be her dad's friend and get to know her and the boys better for now. That seemed to calm her down, but I realized that it would take me longer to fully win her affection. We ate on the patio, and after dinner, we went down to the dock and rode on Grandpa's boat, after which I headed home. The next week was excruciatingly long. Kevin and I talked every day, but he was working late so he could finish things early on Friday so we could leave as soon as school was over. So we didn't see each other at all until Friday. Friday morning, I went to his house and loaded my stuff in the car so he could pick me up right from school to save time. I was a little disappointed to find out that he was planning on driving his Tahoe this weekend. I was really hoping I'd get a chance to drive his little convertible on the winding mountain roads, but it would be a little difficult to cram our luggage into the car, much less his kids for the trip to school. As we loaded into the car to head to school, I noticed that Hannah hurried outside to take the front passenger seat next to Dad. Kevin threw me an apologetic look and started to say something to her, but I stopped him and told him that it was okay and that I would ride in the back seat with the boys for now. After Kevin dropped us off, I asked Hannah to wait for me in the office until I took the boys to class, because I needed to talk to her about something. She didn't look very happy, but she didn't argue and sat down on the couch in my office to wait for me. When I came back, I sat down next to her and said, "Listen, Hannah, I wanted to talk to you privately about what's going on between me and your father. I can see that it's hard for you to go through all of this, and I want you to know that I understand. I know it's hard for you to see your dad with someone other than your mom, and I want you to know that I am in no way trying to replace your mom. From everything your dad has told me, your mom was a very special woman who loved him, you, and your brothers very much. No matter what happens between me and your dad, it's important for you to realize that he will never forget your mom, and neither will you. I hope that you will always remember the special moments you had with her and the special moments you all experienced as a family. I would never want to take that away from you. So can't you and I just stay friends and nothing more? Can we do that?" "Yes, ma'am. I think I can do that. It's just that I really miss her sometimes, and I'm afraid that after a while we'll all just forget about her." "Honey, I can promise you that you'll never forget about her, and neither will your daddy. In fact, as an older sister, you should do your best to tell your brothers about her, because they weren't old enough to remember her the way you do, and you can help them realize how special she was. Now, how about you give me a big hug to cement our new friendship before you head off to class?" I almost cried as she put her arms around my neck and said, "Thank you, Miss Middleton. I'm sorry if I was rude to you." She got up to leave and turned to me and asked, "Maybe we can sit down sometime and I can show you some pictures of my mom and me? I want to tell you all about her." "I'd like that very much." With those words, she walked out the door and headed to her classroom. The rest of the day went smoothly, and I was more than ready to get into the front seat of the Tahoe when Kevin picked me up at 4 o'clock sharp, as promised. The trip was uneventful and we quickly made it to the secluded cabin as early as 11 o'clock. The drive only took 5 hours, but we stopped for lunch in Columbia, and Kevin insisted that we stop at Cabela's to buy me hiking boots and appropriate clothing and socks. Hiking wasn't on my weekend to-do list, but apparently it was on Kevin's list, so I agreed. We also stopped for groceries at the local supermarket, most importantly coffee and wine. The lodge was just perfect. It was rustic and secluded. No internet or TV, just perfect for a weekend away with someone special. As soon as we arrived, we unpacked the car and laid out the groceries, then sat down at the table for a drink and some relaxation before bed. I felt like this was a happy place for Kevin, since he had talked about living here with Suzanne and the kids. I could still sense some of Kevin's hesitation, even though this weekend was totally his idea. So, to help him relax, I suggested we just sleep in tonight after a long day and a long drive, and do other things tomorrow. He quickly agreed. It felt so good and so natural to be around this man. I fell asleep thinking, this is where I belong. After breakfast, we got dressed and spent the rest of the day hiking in the Pisgah National Forest. Kevin had maps of trails and waterfalls for us to explore. It was amazingly beautiful terrain and the waterfalls were spectacular, even if you had to hike a couple miles to find some of them. After a day in the forest, we returned to the cabin for dinner and another night of lovemaking. The next morning, my legs and hips were very sore from the hike, so we took a break and explored the many local antique stores and boutiques in town and ended the day with a drive around the neighborhood to soak it all in. When I woke up on the last morning, I found the sun shining through the gaps in the curtains and me alone in bed. I looked around, but I didn't find Kevin anywhere in the cabin. When I did find him, I saw him through the window swinging on the front porch swing with tears in his eyes. I have to admit that he made me a little nervous. I decided I'd better get out and see what was going on, so I put on jeans and a sweatshirt and walked out onto the porch. Said, "You seem a little sad this morning. Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. "I guess so, if you're sure you want to know." I assured him I wanted to, and he continued. "Ever since Suzanne died, whenever I have a problem, when I need to make an important decision, or even when I'm feeling a little down, I go off by myself and just talk to her. Somehow, a simple statement helps me make sense of whatever is going on in the moment. So, shortly before she died, we were lying together in her bed and she pulled my face to hers and asked me to promise her that when she was gone, I wouldn't be alone, that I would find someone to love me and our children. I tried to turn the conversation around, but she pulled me to her again and insisted that I promise to move on with my life and find someone else. I realized from her eyes how serious she was, and I promised her I would do it. When I looked into her eyes, I could see she was flooding with tears and she just said thank you. That was the last thing she said to me. Shortly after that, she fell asleep and never woke up again. In the morning, I talked to her and let her know that I had kept my promise to her. I told her about our last few months together and how the kids love having you around, even Hannah, even though she tries not to show it. I guess I just said goodbye to her again because if you and I are going to be together, I need to start talking to you about all the things I've been talking to her about. So I guess I was a little sad, but the thought of a future life with you and my kids makes me really happy. I sat there listening to him, tears streaming down my face. I can tell that you really loved her, and I know that moving on with your life is a little scary for you. But I will tell you what I told Hannah the day we left. You don't have to forget about Suzanne to be with me. She was your wife and your lover for a long time. She was their mother. I'm not going to try to replace her because no one can do that. I just want to start fresh and build a new life with you and your children. Suzanne will forever be a part of you and a part of them. She played a huge part in who you all are today. Heck, I should be the one talking to her and thanking her for the wonderful job she did raising the kids and you." The following summer, we were married for the second time with a small ceremony by the water in the backyard. It was just the two of us with the kids and our parents, but it was beautiful. Sometimes I sit alone and just think about how lucky I am. Most relationships never recover from cheating, but our relationship after 2 cheating relationships is better than ever. We still fight from time to time and sometimes do hurtful things, but we always manage to talk things out and grow stronger in the end. I'm just thankful that Kevin and I have been able to show each other mercy. Someone once told me that when someone shows you mercy, they are offering you kindness and compassion while you deserve justice and punishment. I think that characterizes our second life together in the best possible way. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.